Tamriel has faced countless threats throughout the ages, ranging from various full-scale Daedric invasions to floating soul-devouring cities. However, in today's video we're going to be talking about the biggest threat Tamriel has ever faced, Dagoth-Ur. This might come as a surprise to some, as Dagoth's actions seemed localized to Morrowind, but Dagoth's true intention was not only to conquer Morrowind, but the entirety of Tamriel. And I don't just mean conquer in the traditional sense, Dagoth was out to conquer everyone's minds as well. Of course, there are some conjectures about just how evil Dagoth's intentions actually were regarding his plans, since there are accounts which suggest that it was the Tribunal, and not Dagoth, who murdered Nerevar and manipulated the heart of Lorkhan to achieve godhood. Nonetheless, despite his intentions, had Dagoth-Ur triumphed, Tamriel would be vastly different to how it is today, and of all the threats presented in each Elder Scrolls game, Dagoth's was the most dangerous by far. Before we get into the actual threat Dagoth-Ur posed to Tamriel, let us recount his beginnings. Dagoth-Ur was born Vorin Dagoth, a member of the Great House Dagoth, sometime during the First Era. As the years passed, Dagoth gained more prestige within his house, and ultimately this culminated in him being named the Lord High Chancellor of House Dagoth, which was the ruling position. After the defeat of invading Nords by a combined force of Dwemer and Chimer at the First Battle of Red Mountain, the First Council was formed between the Hortator of Morrowind, Nerevar, and Dumak, the Dwarven King. This council reigned for centuries, and there was a lasting period of peace and plenty between the Chimer and Dwemer of Morrowind, that is until the intervention of Vorin Dagoth. He claimed that the Dwemer tonal architect, Kraganak, was using the heart of Lorkhan to construct a golem that would destroy the Chimer. After Azura ratified these claims, Nerevar was left no choice but to declare war on the once seemingly friendly Dwemer. Although the war was a bloody one, it would eventually culminate in the disappearance of the Dwemer at the Second Battle of Red Mountain. As the Chimer forces were left awestruck on the volcano's slopes at the sudden disappearance of their foes, Nerevar and Vorin Dagoth recovered the Dwemer tools Sunder, Keening and Wraithguard. These were the tools that Kraganak had been using at the crux of the mountain to try and manipulate the heart of Lorkhan, and the decision of what should be done with Kraganak's inventions fell to Nerevar. Vorin voiced his concern to Nerevar of the tools' power, and strongly called for their destruction. Nerevar then, thinking Vorin trustworthy, left the tools in Dagoth's hands while he went to convene and seek counsel from the Tribunal. Nerevar soon came to the decision that the tools were to be locked away, yet never used, but when he returned to Vorin at the heart of Red Mountain, the Chimer denied him access, citing that it was his job to protect the tools at all costs, even from his comrades. Unbeknownst to Nerevar, however, Dagoth had been experimenting with Kraganak's tools in his absence and somehow managed to tether his being to the heart of Lorkhan and siphon off some of its power. Vorin now claimed that he was Dagoth-Ur and called himself by that name thereon. There was an ensuing battle between Dagoth-Ur, Nerevar and the Tribunal, which ended with the apparent death of Dagoth-Ur and Nerevar being mortally wounded. Before long, Nerevar perished from a severe wound, but it remains unclear who struck the mortal blow to the Hortator during the fight. It could have quite easily been the Tribunal, considering that after the death of their leader, they immediately went against his wishes and used Kraganak's tools to achieve godhood. It was at this point that the Daedra Prince Azura appeared and cursed the Tribunal for going against Nerevar's wishes. But whilst the curse didn't immediately affect the new gods, it did lead to the rest of the Chimer becoming the darker-skinned Dunmer. All the while this was going on, in secret, Dagoth-Ur had managed to stay alive and immortal through his connection to the heart of Lorkhan, and for the next few centuries he would bide his time at the heart of Red Mountain, waiting and watching and slowly spreading his influence. In the Second Era, year 283, the Tribunal were journeying to Red Mountain to undertake a ritual that would renew their godly powers. And of course they had with them Kraganak's tools, Wraithguard, Keening and Sunder, which they would use to manipulate the heart of Lorkhan. But hundreds of years had passed since they last journeyed to the mountain, and in this time Dagoth-Ur and the rest of House Dagoth had been reborn in new bodies that were more than a match for the likes of the Tribunal and their followers. Dagoth's forces were successfully able to deny the Tribunal access to the heart, and this proved detrimental to the trio of gods. Whilst Dagoth-Ur possessed the heart, he would grow eternally stronger as the Tribunal grew gradually weaker. In a desperate attempt to halt the decline of their power, Sothasil and Ormalexia launched assaults on the mountain to reclaim the heart, but their attempts failed disastrously, as both the tools Sunder and Keening were lost to Dagoth's ash vampires during the attacks. This left only Wraithguard in the Tribunal's possession. Knowing they were unable to defeat Dagoth through force of arms, the ever-weakening Tribunal devoted much of their power to erecting a barrier called the Ghost Fence around Red Mountain to stop Dagoth leaving and invading Morrowind. This pretty much brings us to when the events of Morrowind take place. At this point, Dagoth is in a position of power, and Morrowind, along with the rest of Tamriel, is ripe for the taking. It was at this very point in Elder Scrolls history that Dagoth posed the biggest threat Tamriel had ever seen. You see, Dagoth had 5 basic objectives he wanted to achieve at any cost. The first objective is one fundamental to Dagoth's cause, and one of the most worrying objectives that he had. Dagoth wished to establish a new theocracy in Morrowind and wider Tamriel based on the worship of what was essentially the second Numidium, which he called Akula Khan. Dagoth built upon the techniques Kraganak had pioneered so many centuries earlier in constructing the first Numidium, and this served Dagoth well, since ultimately Dagoth had much the same goal as Kraganak in constructing Akula Khan. He wished to imbue the heart of Lorkin into the metal body in order to create a new, all-powerful god, who would then present himself and his followers as the god priests of Akula Khan, with himself ultimately as Morrowind's ruler. And through charismatic conversion, he would wrest Morrowind from the clutches of the Empire, establishing the province as its own state. Dagoth's second objective, in link with the first, was to expose the fake worship of the Tribunal and to eradicate the authority of the temple in Morrowind. Next, he also aimed to purge Morrowind of any mongrel beings or races he deemed inferior to the Dunmer, although it isn't exactly made clear who or what this would have included. A smaller, more temporary objective of Dagoth's was to recover the land stolen from the Dunmer by the Nords and the Argonians throughout the ages. Essentially, he wanted to restore Morrowind to its full former glory before branching out to the other provinces. And finally, Dagoth's main objective was to extend the worship of Akula Khan to all nations of Tamriel through subversion and conquest, but most critically through the spread of his blight disease. Throughout Morrowind, the player comes into contact with various beings infected with blight, the disease that Dagoth manufactured and spread in order to make others an extension of himself. The corpus and blight diseases, which are pretty similar in their ending effects, fundamentally forced people to join Dagoth's hive mind. The blight overwrites your own flesh to make you a member of the 6th house, making you effectively an extension of Dagoth. Whilst this disease does obviously aid in Dagoth's objectives of conquering the known world, the blight posed a far greater threat to the Elder Scrolls universe than any could imagine. After so many years spent alone with the heart of Lorkin, Dagoth turned somewhat mad, and there was a 6th objective he had that underpinned the other 5. Dagoth wished to spread his blight disease to every corner of the universe in order to make everything an extension of himself, so that ultimately he could make the Elder Scrolls universe his dream. He supposed that if he both acknowledged his own individuality, but made every other being tied to him as an individual, he could usurp the current Dreamer, or Godhead of the Elder Scrolls universe, and become the new Godhead. The thing is, it's unclear whether this is actually possible, and it's more than likely Dagoth would have simply erased the Elder Scrolls universe by devouring the current Godhead. But, in all honesty, who knows? All in all, Dagoth posed the greatest threat not only Tamriel, but the Elder Scrolls universe has ever seen, in that it was his endeavour to usurp the current Godhead, which could have inadvertently led to the end of the Elder Scrolls universe. Thanks for watching this video. I do know that the latter half of this video has been quite technical, so I do recommend that you look into the idea of Amaranth and the Godhead yourself if you feel you need to. If you want to learn more about Elder Scrolls lore, then feel free to check out the myriad of other Elder Scrolls lore and speculation videos I have on my channel.